In a world where royal duties often separate families during the most precious moments, one New Year's celebration would prove that love, laughter, and cherished traditions can bridge any distance. As 2023 drew to a close, Catherine and William faced an unexpected opportunity to create memories that would warm their hearts for years to come. The crisp December air carried the promise of new beginnings, but it was the gentle knock on Carole and Michael Middleton's door that would transform an ordinary evening into an extraordinary family reunion. What started as a simple phone call between a daughter and her parents would unfold into a story of spontaneous joy, rediscovered connections, and the beautiful chaos that only comes when grandchildren surprise their grandparents on the most magical night of the year. Sometimes the most meaningful celebrations aren't planned months in advance or marked by grand gestures. Sometimes they happen when you least expect them, in the comfort of a familiar kitchen, surrounded by the people who knew you before the world knew your name. This is the story of one such evening, where titles were forgotten, formality was set aside, and a family simply enjoyed being together as the calendar turned toward new possibilities. The grandfather clock in the hallway of Kensington Palace chimed 8 times as Catherine finished reading the evening story to Charlotte. The little princess had insisted on hearing about brave knights and magical kingdoms for the 3rd time that week, her eyes growing heavy with sleep as her mother's gentle voice filled the nursery. William stood in the doorway, watching his wife tuck their daughter under the soft pink blankets, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Mummy, will we see Granny Carole tomorrow for the fireworks?" Charlotte asked sleepily, referring to her beloved grandmother with the affection that had never dimmed despite the royal protocols that sometimes governed their lives. Catherine paused, her hand smoothing Charlotte's hair. They had planned a quiet New Year's Eve at Kensington Palace, just the immediate family. The past year had been filled with official engagements, state dinners, and countless public appearances. The idea of a peaceful evening at home had seemed perfect just hours earlier. But something in Charlotte's innocent question stirred a longing in Catherine's heart that she hadn't fully acknowledged until that moment. "We'll see, sweetheart," Catherine whispered, pressing a gentle kiss to her daughter's forehead. "Sweet dreams." As they stepped into the corridor, William noticed the thoughtful expression on his wife's face. After 15 years together, he could read her moods like a familiar book. Something was shifting in her mind, and he suspected it had everything to do with Charlotte's question about her grandparents. "You're thinking about your parents, aren't you?" William asked quietly as they made their way to their private sitting room. The palace felt particularly vast that evening, with its high ceilings and formal portraits watching over them like silent guardians of tradition. Catherine nodded, settling into the comfortable armchair by the fireplace. "I was just thinking about last New Year's Eve at their house. Do you remember how George helped Papa Michael stack the firewood? And how Charlotte insisted on helping Mummy Carole make those little appetizers? Louis was so excited about staying up past his bedtime." William remembered it well. It had been one of those rare evenings when the weight of their royal responsibilities had seemed to lift completely. Michael Middleton had taught George how to properly arrange kindling, his patient grandfather's voice explaining the importance of airflow and dry wood. Carole had welcomed Charlotte's enthusiastic but messy help in the kitchen, never once worried about the flour that ended up on the floor or the slightly lopsided canapes that resulted from small hands trying to help. "They haven't seen the children properly in weeks," Catherine continued, her voice carrying a note of regret. "Between the Christmas engagements and the school schedule, we've all been so busy. I keep thinking about how quickly they're growing up and how much Mum and Dad are missing." The truth was that both Catherine and William had been feeling the strain of the holiday season. While Christmas with the extended royal family at Sandringham had been lovely, it had also been formal and scheduled. Every meal had been planned, every activity coordinated with security protocols. The children had been on their best behavior, mindful of the many guests and the cameras that always seemed to lurk nearby. "What if we went tonight?" Catherine asked suddenly, the words tumbling out before she had fully formed the thought. "What if we surprised them?" William looked up from the evening papers he had been pretending to read. Tonight? Catherine, it's New Year's Eve. Security would need time to coordinate, and your parents might have plans. But even as he spoke, William felt a spark of excitement at the idea. He thought about Michael Middleton's warm laugh and Carole's way of making everyone feel at home. He remembered how his father-in-law never made him feel like the future king during family gatherings, instead treating him like the son-in-law who helped carry groceries and fixed broken garden furniture. "We could call them," Catherine suggested, already reaching for her phone. "If they're free, we could drive over tonight. The children would be so excited to see them, and we could ring in the new year together." The spontaneity of the idea was both thrilling and slightly terrifying. Royal life was built on schedules, protocols, and careful planning. Spontaneous family visits required security arrangements, route planning, and typically weeks of advance notice. But something about the quiet evening and Charlotte's innocent question had awakened a desire for the kind of simple family connection that had become increasingly rare in their carefully orchestrated lives. "What about the children?" William asked, though his practical concerns were already giving way to enthusiasm for the plan. "They're already in their pajamas, and Louis was nearly asleep when I checked on him 20 minutes ago. We could wake them gently," Catherine replied, her eyes beginning to sparkle with the excitement of the impromptu plan. "You know they'd rather be tired tomorrow than miss a chance to surprise Granny and Grandpa. And honestly, when was the last time we did something completely unplanned?" William had to think about that question longer than he would have liked. Their lives are managed down to 15-minute intervals most days. Even family time was often scheduled around official duties and public commitments. The idea of simply deciding to visit family on a whim was both foreign and deeply appealing. "Call them," he decided, standing up and heading toward the nursery hallway. "I'll start getting the children ready. But, Catherine, if they're busy or if this feels like too much trouble." "They're never too busy for the children," Catherine said confidently, already dialing her mother's number. "And, you know, Mom, she'll probably have a full meal ready within an hour of us arriving, even though we haven't given her any notice." As William quietly opened George's bedroom door, he could hear Catherine's excited voice in the sitting room, explaining their spontaneous plan to her mother. The surprised delight in Carole Middleton's voice carried clearly down the hallway, confirming what William already knew. Family was always welcome at the Middleton household, planned or not. George stirred as his father gently touched his shoulder. At 10 years old, he was old enough to understand when something special was happening, and the excitement in his father's voice quickly chased away any sleepiness. "We're going to see Granny and Grandpa Middleton tonight," William explained quietly. "It's a surprise, so we need to get dressed quickly and quietly. Do you think you can help me wake Charlotte and Louis without making too much noise?" The conspirative nature of the plan immediately appealed to George, who was always eager to be included in grown-up decisions. He nodded seriously, already climbing out of bed and reaching for his clothes. "Should I pack my overnight bag, Papa?" "Just a small one," William replied, touched by his son's practical thinking. "We might stay the night if it gets too late." As father and son made their way to Charlotte's room, they could hear Catherine's continued conversation with her mother, punctuated by excited laughter and rapid planning. Carole Middleton was clearly embracing the spontaneous visit with characteristic warmth and efficiency. Charlotte woke more slowly than her older brother, but her face lit up with pure joy when she understood what was happening. "Really? We're going to see Granny tonight? On New Year's Eve?" "Really," William confirmed, helping her choose warm clothes from her wardrobe. "But we need to hurry because we want to surprise them." Louis, at 5 years old, required more coaxing to fully wake up, but the promise of staying up late and seeing his grandparents was enough to motivate him through the process of getting dressed. William found himself marveling at how quickly the children embraced the spontaneous adventure, their excitement infectious and pure. By the time they reconvened in the sitting room, Catherine had finished coordinating with her parents and was already making practical arrangements. "Mum is absolutely thrilled," she reported, her own excitement evident in her flushed cheeks and bright eyes. "Dad was just saying how quiet the house felt tonight, and now she's planning snacks and games for the children." "What about security?" William asked, though he was already mentally committed to the plan. "I've called the team," Catherine replied. "They're actually pleased. Apparently, a quiet evening in Berkshire is much easier to manage than some of the alternatives they were prepared for. 2 cars, minimal fuss, and we could be there in under 2 hours." As they bundled the children into warm coats and gathered overnight bags, William felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in months. There was something liberating about abandoning their carefully planned evening for this spontaneous family adventure. The children chattered excitedly about surprising their grandparents, already planning games they wanted to play and stories they wanted to tell. "Are we really going to stay up until midnight?" George asked as they made their way to the cars. "If you can manage it," Catherine replied with a smile. "This is a special night." As their convoy pulled away from Kensington Palace, William reached for Catherine's hand in the darkness of the car. "This was a wonderful idea," he said quietly, not wanting to wake Louis, who was already dozing against his mother's shoulder. "Sometimes the best plans are no plans at all," Catherine replied, squeezing his hand gently. "I have a feeling this is going to be a New Year's Eve we'll all remember for a very long time." The lights of London slipped past their windows as they headed toward the M4, carrying with them the promise of an evening filled with the kind of simple family joy that no amount of royal protocol could replicate. Behind them, Kensington Palace stood quiet and orderly, waiting for their return. Ahead of them, a cozy house in Berkshire was about to become the setting for the most perfectly imperfect New Year's celebration any of them could imagine. The familiar country roads of Berkshire wound through the darkness as their convoy approached the Middleton family home. Catherine found herself holding her breath with anticipation as they turned into the tree-lined drive she had traveled countless times throughout her life. The house stood warm and welcoming against the winter night, every window glowing with soft yellow light that spoke of comfort and belonging. Michael Middleton appeared at the front door before their cars had even come to a complete stop, his face breaking into the kind of genuine smile that came from pure, unexpected joy. Behind him, Carole bustled with characteristic energy, her hands already reaching to embrace whoever would arrive first at her doorstep. "Granny! Grandpa!" Charlotte's voice rang out across the quiet evening air as she tumbled from the car, her careful royal composure forgotten in the excitement of the moment. She ran straight into Michael's arms, her grandfather lifting her in a spinning hug that made her giggle with delight. George followed more sedately, but with equal enthusiasm, while Louis, still drowsy from the car ride, clung to his father's hand as they approached the house. William carried overnight bags in his free hand, but his formal posture relaxed with each step toward the welcoming doorway. "Look what the wind blew in," Michael said warmly, his voice rich with affection and gentle humor. 3 small whirlwinds and their parents, arriving just in time for the most important celebration of the year. Carole had already enveloped Catherine in the kind of mother's hug that conveyed both surprise and absolute delight. "My darling girl," she murmured against her daughter's ear. "This is exactly what tonight needed. Your father and I were just saying how quiet everything felt." The entrance hallway filled quickly with the cheerful chaos that only arrived with 3 excited children. Coats were shed in enthusiastic piles. Small voices chattered over each other, sharing news and observations from their journey, and the formal protocols that typically governed royal arrivals were nowhere to be found. "Uncle James texted that he's driving over from his flat," Carole announced as she helped Louis out of his coat, her grandmother's hands gentle but efficient. "He was spending New Year's Eve reading a book. Can you imagine? He'll be here within the hour." The news that Uncle James would join them sent fresh waves of excitement through the children. Catherine's younger brother had always been a favorite, willing to engage in elaborate games and adventures that other adults might consider beneath their dignity. "Is he bringing his motorcycle?" George asked hopefully, already envisioning dramatic stories to share with his school friends. In this weather? Absolutely not, Carole replied firmly, but her eyes twinkled with amusement. He's bringing his sensible car and hopefully some of those biscuits from that little bakery near his office. As they moved from the entrance hall into the heart of the house, William was struck again by how effortlessly the Middleton home embraced unexpected guests. There was no sense of disruption or inconvenience, only the warm expansion of hospitality that seemed to be Carole and Michael's natural state. The sitting room had been quickly transformed since Catherine's phone call. A fire crackled cheerfully in the fireplace. Extra cushions had appeared on the sofas, and a collection of games and puzzles waited on the coffee table. The subtle signs of hasty but loving preparation were everywhere. Fresh flowers hastily arranged, additional lamps turned on to create warm pools of light, and the faint aroma of something delicious already beginning to emerge from the kitchen. "Mummy, you didn't need to go to all this trouble," Catherine protested, but her voice carried affection rather than genuine concern. "Trouble?" Carole looked genuinely puzzled by the suggestion. "Having my family arrive unexpectedly on New Year's Eve isn't trouble, darling. It's the best possible gift I could have received." Michael had already settled into his favorite armchair with Louis on his lap, the youngest grandchild drawn to his grandfather's calm presence. "Now then, young man," Michael said seriously, "I believe you've grown at least 3 inches since I saw you last week. Are you certain you're the same Louis who was here for Christmas dinner?" Louis giggled at his grandfather's mock confusion, launching into an animated explanation of his recent growth spurt and the new foods he had tried during the holiday season. His small hands gestured enthusiastically as he described a particularly impressive Brussels sprout that had been as big as a tennis ball. "Grandpa, Charlotte had discovered the art supplies that Carole kept in a basket specifically for grandchildren visits." She was already settling at the small table by the window, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration as she began working on what appeared to be a New Year's greeting card. "Are you going to make one for everyone?" Catherine asked, settling beside her daughter and admiring the careful work already taking shape. "One for everyone, and extra ones for the dogs," Charlotte replied seriously. "Orla and Ella should have cards too, shouldn't they?" The mention of the family's beloved spaniels sent George searching through the house, calling their names with the enthusiasm of someone reuniting with treasured friends. The sounds of excited barking and George's laughter echoed from the back garden, where the dogs were clearly giving him the enthusiastic reception he had hoped for. "Those dogs have been waiting by the door since your call," Michael observed with amusement. "I think they somehow understood that children were coming." William found himself sinking into the comfortable familiarity of the Middleton family rhythm. Here, there are no equerries waiting with schedules, no security briefings to review, no protocols to observe. Here, he was simply William, husband to Catherine, father to their children, and valued member of a family that had long ago stopped being impressed by his titles. "Can I help with anything in the kitchen?" he asked Carole, knowing from experience that she would have several projects underway despite the short notice. "You can help me decide between 2 different cheese platters," Carole replied with the kind of serious consideration she brought to all hosting decisions. "I couldn't choose, so I prepared both." The kitchen, when they reached it, bore evidence of Carole's efficient response to unexpected guests. Platters of elegant appetizers covered every available surface. A pot of something fragrant simmered on the stove, and fresh bread waited to be sliced. Despite having received only 2 hours' notice, she had managed to create a feast that would have done credit to a formal dinner party. "Mum, this is incredible," Catherine said, surveying the abundant preparations. "You've outdone yourself." "Nonsense," Carole replied briskly, but her pleasure at the compliment was evident. "I simply opened a few things I had prepared for tomorrow and added some extras. Besides, cooking for people you love is never work, it's joy." The arrival of James Middleton brought fresh energy to the already lively evening. Catherine's younger brother appeared at the kitchen door with snow dusting his shoulders and his arms full of packages that proved to contain not only the promised bakery treats, but also an impressive collection of fireworks he had apparently purchased on impulse during his drive over. "Uncle James!" The cry went up from all three children simultaneously as they discovered his arrival. Within moments, he was surrounded by small bodies, all competing for his attention and eager to share the news of their surprise visit. "So you've all decided to crash the grandparents' quiet evening, have you?" James asked with mock severity, his eyes twinkling with the same warmth that characterized the entire Middleton family. "I suppose you expect to be fed and entertained as well?" "Yes," Lewis replied with perfect seriousness, apparently missing the joke entirely. "And we want to see fireworks and play games and stay up until midnight." "A reasonable list of demands," James agreed solemnly. "I believe we can accommodate all of those requests, though staying up until midnight will require considerable fortitude from certain small people." As the evening progressed, the house filled with the kind of easy conversation and comfortable laughter that marked the best family gatherings. Michael regaled the children with stories from his own childhood New Year celebrations, complete with dramatic gestures that sent them into fits of giggles. Carole moved seamlessly between kitchen and sitting room, ensuring everyone was fed and comfortable without ever seeming hurried or stressed. William found himself in the garden with James, helping to set up the fireworks display while the children watched through the window, their faces pressed against the glass in excitement. The two men worked efficiently together, their conversation ranging from practical matters like wind direction to more philosophical observations about family and tradition. "Catherine seems lighter tonight," James observed quietly as they positioned the last of the Roman candles. "I haven't seen her this relaxed in months." William nodded, understanding exactly what his brother-in-law meant. "She needed this," he replied. "We all needed this. Sometimes royal life can feel like living in a beautiful museum, everything perfect and properly arranged, but not quite real. And this feels real," James said, gesturing toward the house where warm light spilled from every window, and the sounds of family life created a gentle symphony of belonging. "This feels like home," William agreed, surprising himself with the emotion in his voice. As they returned to the house, they found Catherine and her mother putting finishing touches on the midnight celebration preparations. Carole had produced party hats from some mysterious storage location, along with noisemakers and a bottle of champagne that had apparently been waiting for just such an occasion. "Are we really going to make it to midnight?" Charlotte asked, rubbing her eyes but trying to hide her growing sleepiness. "We're going to try our very best," Catherine assured her, smoothing her daughter's hair with gentle fingers. "But if someone falls asleep before the countdown, that's perfectly fine too." "I won't fall asleep," George declared with the confidence of his 10 years. "I've never stayed awake until midnight before." "Then this will be a very special first," Michael said warmly, settling back in his chair with Lewis once again claiming his lap. "First times deserve to be celebrated with people who love you most." The simple truth of his grandfather's words seemed to settle over the room like a warm blanket. As the evening drew closer to its magical midnight moment, each family member felt the precious weight of being exactly where they belonged, surrounded by exactly the right people, creating memories that would warm their hearts for years to come. As 11 o'clock approached, the Middleton household had transformed into a cozy celebration headquarters. The sitting room buzzed with gentle activity as family members prepared for the approaching midnight hour. Charlotte had finished her collection of New Year's cards and was now helping her grandmother arrange party favors on a silver tray, her small hands carefully placing colorful noise makers in neat rows. George had claimed responsibility for the countdown clock, checking his watch every few minutes and announcing the remaining time with the seriousness of a royal herald. 57 minutes until midnight, everyone, he called out, his voice carrying both excitement and the weight of his self-appointed duty. Lewis had begun to show signs of the late hour, his eyelids growing heavy as he leaned against his grandfather's shoulder. Michael had wrapped him in a soft throw blanket, creating a perfect nest where the little boy could rest while still remaining part of the evening's activities. "Someone is fighting sleep very bravely," Michael murmured affectionately, his hand gently stroking his grandson's hair. "But even brave knights need their rest." "Not sleepy, Grandpa," Lewis mumbled, though his drooping eyelids suggested otherwise. "Want to see fireworks with everyone." James had taken charge of the music selection, creating an impromptu playlist of family favorites that range from classic jazz to songs the children had learned at school. The eclectic mix created a soundtrack that perfectly captured the evening's spirit, familiar, joyful, and completely unpretentious. Catherine found herself curled up on the sofa beside William, watching their children interact with their parents with a heart full of gratitude. These were the moments that made all the formal obligations and public scrutiny worthwhile, seeing her children experience the unconditional love and acceptance that had shaped her own childhood. "Your mother has been cooking non-stop for 2 hours," William observed quietly, nodding toward the kitchen where Carole could be seen putting finishing touches on what appeared to be a midnight feast. "Does she ever sit still?" "Only when she's absolutely certain everyone else is comfortable," Catherine replied with fond exasperation. "She's been like this my entire life, showing love through endless acts of service." As if summoned by their conversation, Carole appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray laden with steaming mugs of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and marshmallows. "I thought everyone might need warming up before we brave the garden for fireworks," she announced, distributing mugs with the efficiency of someone who had been serving family gatherings for decades. The hot chocolate was met with universal approval, even from Lewis, who perked up considerably at the prospect of chocolate and sugar. Charlotte carefully added extra marshmallows to hers, creating a towering confection that threatened to overflow her mug. "Granny, this is the best hot chocolate in the entire world," she declared with the absolute conviction that only children possess. "That's because it's made with the secret ingredient," Carole replied seriously, settling into her favorite chair with her own steaming mug. "What's the secret ingredient?" George asked, immediately intrigued by the possibility of hidden knowledge. "Love," Carole said simply, and though the answer might have seemed cheesy coming from someone else, her grandchildren accepted it as absolute truth. As 11:30 approached, the excitement in the room became almost tangible. James had retrieved coats and scarves for the outdoor fireworks display, while Michael checked the weather conditions one final time. The snow had stopped, leaving the garden blanketed in pristine white that would provide perfect contrast for the colorful fireworks. "Time for the practice countdown," George announced importantly, consulting his watch with professional seriousness. "In exactly 30 minutes, we'll do the real thing." "A practice countdown sounds very sensible," William agreed, entering into his son's game with complete seriousness. "We wouldn't want to make any mistakes when midnight actually arrives." The practice countdown became an elaborate production, with George leading the family through the numbers from 10 to 0, while everyone experimented with their noisemakers and cheered with theatrical enthusiasm. Lewis giggled delightedly at the silly spectacle, his tiredness temporarily forgotten in the joy of the moment. "That was excellent practice," Michael declared when they reached 0. "I believe we're ready for the real event. But first, I have something special for everyone," Carole announced mysteriously, disappearing into the kitchen and returning with a beautiful wooden box that Catherine recognized from her childhood. "Mummy, is that the tradition box?" Catherine asked, her voice soft with memory. "The very same," Carole confirmed, settling the box carefully on the coffee table. "I thought tonight would be perfect for sharing some of our family traditions with the children." The tradition box had been part of Catherine's childhood for as long as she could remember. Each New Year's Eve, her mother would bring out the beautiful wooden container filled with special items collected over the years, small tokens, photographs, and mementos that represented important family moments and milestones. "What's in the box, Granny?" Charlotte asked, moving closer with curiosity shining in her eyes. "Memories," Carole replied gently, opening the lid to reveal layers of carefully preserved treasures. "And wishes for the future." She began removing items one by one, each with its own story. There was a small silver bell that had belonged to Catherine's great-grandmother, a smooth stone from the beach where Michael had proposed to Carole, and a collection of photographs showing family celebrations through the years. "This one is from your mummy's first New Year's Eve," Carole said, holding up a faded photograph of a very young Catherine fast asleep in her father's arms. "She was only 6 months old, but we wanted her to be part of our celebration." The children examined each treasure with reverence, understanding instinctively that they were being welcomed into something special and sacred. George held the silver bell carefully, listening to its gentle chime, while Charlotte traced her finger around the edge of the proposal stone. "And now," Carole continued, "it's time to add something new to our collection." She produced a beautiful blank journal and an elegant pen. "Tonight, we'll start a new tradition. Everyone will write down one special memory from this evening and one wish for the coming year." The journal was passed from person to person, each family member taking time to consider their contribution carefully. Michael wrote about the joy of unexpected visitors and the gift of spontaneous celebration. James documented the laughter of his nephews and niece and his wish for many more impromptu family gatherings. When the journal reached William, he paused for a long moment, his pen hovering over the cream-colored paper. Finally, he wrote about the feeling of coming home to family and his hope that their children would always understand the difference between duty and joy. Catherine's entry spoke of gratitude for parents who had always made love feel effortless, and her wish that their spontaneous evening would remind all of them to prioritize connection over convenience in the year ahead. Even the children contributed, with George writing carefully about staying up until midnight with everyone he loved most, and Charlotte drawing a picture of the entire family surrounded by fireworks and hearts. "What about Louis?" Charlotte asked, noticing that her youngest brother had been quietly observing rather than participating. "Louis can dictate his memory to me," Catherine suggested, but the little boy shook his head seriously. "Want to draw too," he declared, accepting crayons from his grandmother and creating an enthusiastic scribble that somehow perfectly captured the energy and joy of their unexpected evening. As the clock approached 11:55, the family bundled into coats and scarf for the outdoor finale of their celebration. The garden was transformed by the snow, creating a magical winter wonderland that seemed designed specifically for their intimate fireworks display. James had arranged the fireworks with impressive precision, creating a display that would be spectacular without being overwhelming for the children. Michael stood ready with matches while the rest of the family gathered in a semicircle, their faces bright with anticipation. 5 minutes until midnight, George announced, his voice carrying across the quiet garden. "This is really happening." "It really is," Catherine agreed, pulling her children closer as they waited for the magical moment that would mark the transition from one year to the next. The final countdown began at exactly midnight, with George leading them through the numbers while James lit the first firework. Colors exploded across the dark sky, reflecting off the snow-covered garden and the upturned faces of family members who were completely absorbed in the beauty of the moment. 10, 9, 8. The voices joined together, creating a chorus of excitement and anticipation. 7, 6, 5. Louis had woken up completely, his tiredness forgotten in the drama of the countdown. 4, 3, 2. Charlotte bounced on her toes, her noise maker ready for the climactic moment. 1. Happy New Year! The garden erupted in celebration as fireworks painted the sky in brilliant shades of gold and silver. Noise makers rattled, family members embraced, and the dogs barked their own enthusiastic contribution to the festivities. In that perfect moment, surrounded by love and laughter and the magical glow of fireworks, each person felt the profound joy of being exactly where they belonged. As the last firework faded from the sky, leaving trails of sparkling light across the winter darkness, the family stood together in comfortable silence, watching the embers drift down like falling stars. The new year had arrived, not with grand fanfare or formal ceremony, but with the gentle magic that comes from family, spontaneity, and the courage to follow your heart toward the people who matter most. "Best New Year's Eve ever," Charlotte declared sleepily, leaning against her mother's side as they finally headed back toward the warmth of the house. "Best New Year's Eve so far," Michael corrected gently, his arm around his wife as they followed their family inside. "Something tells me this is just the beginning of many beautiful celebrations to come." And as they gathered in the sitting room for final cups of tea and quiet conversation before the children finally succumbed to sleep, each family member carried the certainty that they had just experienced something truly special. A perfect evening created not through careful planning or elaborate preparation, but through the simple decision to choose love, spontaneity, and connection over convenience. The tradition box sat open on the coffee table, its new journal entry marking the beginning of what they all knew would become a treasured family story. The night they decided that the best celebrations happen when you least expect them, in the company of people who love you exactly as you are.